I'm recording this Sunday morning, April 12th, and yesterday morning, 4 human beings splashed down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego after flying 700,000 miles around the moon and back. 700,000 miles, the farthest any humans have traveled from Earth since 1970. They set a new distance record, 756,000 miles away from home, and one of them, pilot Victor Glover, said afterward that he hadn't even begun to process what they had all just been through. That riding a fireball back through the atmosphere was, quote, profound. I watched the Splashdown feed with my little girls from Entebbe, Uganda, sitting under a sky full of stars, and I generally got a little emotional about it. Because this stuff, it still matters. It's supposed to matter. The Artemis II crew, Reid Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen, they named a previously unnamed crater on the moon after Commander Wiseman's late wife, Carol. She had died of cancer back in 2020. The whole crew was in tears. Hansen said, "You'd be able to see it from Earth, a bright spot on the moon, named for a woman who never got to see it." And here's where I have to take a breath. Because while this was happening, while humans were doing one of the most extraordinary things our species has ever done, my social media feed was full of people explaining at great lengths why it was all filmed in a studio in Burbank and, quote, it's just AI. Now, look, I want to be clear about something. The people posting moon hoax content, they are not the majority. They're not even close to a majority. But boy, oh boy, are they loud. They have algorithms that reward engagement, and nothing generates engagement quite like telling someone everything they believe is a lie. But the actual percentage of Americans who believe the moon landings were fake sits around 10%, depending on which poll you read. 10%, a very loud minority. But here's the thing, 10% still seems high. The reason why I cannot let that loud minority bring us down, that loud minority, they did not stop NASA from launching Artemis II. They didn't stop the mission. They didn't delay the splashdown. They posted on Instagram while the rocket was climbing through the atmosphere, and the engineers at the Johnson Space Center, they were watching the telemetry. The noise is and was real. The mission, however, was more real. I've been in the solar industry for almost 20 years. I was on the team that put solar up on Fenway Park. I heat my house in the Western Maine Mountains with solar powered heat pumps. And I can tell you that there is nearly an identical loud minority when it comes to climate science and renewable energy. You know them. You've seen them out on your Facebook comments. They are at the Thanksgiving table. They have been loudly, confidently wrong for well over 20 years. And in those same 20 years, the solar industry has dropped the cost per watt by roughly 90%. They have added more generating capacity than anyone thought was possible. The loud minority did not stop that either. So here's my question. What exactly are scientists getting out of this? Here's what I actually want to ask the moon hoax and the flat earthers and the climate denial crowd. And I mean this generally, not as a gotcha. What is the point? If the earth were actually flat, what would round earth scientists gain from lying about it? A grant, a pat on the back, access to secret globe shaped conference rooms where Big Sphere meets quarterly to count their sphere money? The conspiracy requires thousands of physicists, pilots, satellite engineers, sailors, and Antarctic researchers all coordinating, all keeping their mouths shut. All for what exactly? What is the payoff for the scientists? Same question for climate science. If global warming were a hoax, what does climate researcher at the University of Montana gain by faking the data? Their salary is public record, and it is unfortunately not that impressive. They drive a Subaru. The follow the money argument that conspiracy theorists love to invoke, it actually points directly away from the scientists and directly toward the people whose business model depends on you not believing those scientists. Because here's who does have a clear, well documented, enormous financial motive to manufacture doubt: the fossil fuel industry. We're talking about companies that, as of last year, were generating $1.3 billion per day in profits. Billions per day. They funded the same think tanks that told you that cigarettes were fine. They hired the same PR firms. They used the same playbook, word for word. Manufacture a little bit of doubt, keep the debate alive, make people feel like the science is unsettled when the actual scientific consensus sits above 97%. The flat earth guys, their motive is a podcast and a merch table. The tobacco guys, the oil guys, their motives is a $1 trillion business model. One of these things is worth taking seriously as a threat. And I want to be fair about something. The guy who thinks the earth is flat and the oil company lobbyists are not necessarily the same person. Most flat earthers, they are not funded by Chevron. Most climate deniers genuinely believe, for some reason, what they are saying. But they share something important. They share a broken relationship with evidence, a pre-committed conclusion that working backwards to find the supporting facts and dismisses everything else as part of the conspiracy. And that habit of mind is incredibly useful to people who need the public confused about science. Look, you don't need to convince someone that climate change is fake. You just need to convince them that the experts can't be trusted, that the data is manipulated, that there's always another side that the mainstream media is hiding. Get someone into that mental mode, and they will find the specific conclusion themselves. It's cheap, it's scalable, and it works. The flat earth content and the climate denial content, they are not the same operation, but they water the same garden. A population that has been trained to distrust credentialed expertise is a population that cannot effectively organize against the people profiting from their confusion. That's not an accident. That is the product. Because here's what's happening while the debate rages online. According to the International Renewable Energy Agency, 2025, it saw the largest single year increase in renewable energy capacity ever recorded. Yet again, 692 gigawatts added globally. Solar alone was responsible for 510 of those gigawatts. The clean energy industry, they added more generating capacity in 1 year than the entire US electricity grid produces today. Not total, in 1 year. The debate about whether renewables work, yeah, it's over. The only debate left is how fast we are going to get there and who is going to do the work. The second question is why this podcast exists, because right now, there are tens of thousands of people sitting in jobs they hate, moving spreadsheet cells around, attending meetings about meetings, watching the best years of their career drain into something that will be forgotten the day they leave. And they do not know that the fastest growing job market in the history of the global economy, it is actively looking for exactly the skills that they have: project management, sales, customer service, financial analyses, operations, marketing. Every one of those skill sets maps directly into roles in the clean energy industry. They pay well and they cannot be outsourced. And they produce something real. A solar panel on a roof, a heat pump humming away in January in Maine, power flowing to a village in Uganda that never had power before. The Artemis II crew flew 700,000 miles while a loud minority told the internet it's not real. The clean energy industry added 692 gigawatts while a loud minority told the internet it's a green scam and it doesn't work. In both cases, the people who ignored the noise and did the work continued to be right. Look, I'm not asking you to ignore any criticism of renewable energy. There are real questions about grid integration, panel recycling, and supply chains. We've talked about them on this show. We'll continue to keep talking about them. Genuine criticism, it makes the industry better. What I am asking you to notice is the difference between genuine criticism and manufactured confusion. One is trying to solve a problem. The other is trying to make sure you don't. If today hits home, if you're sitting somewhere right now feeling Like the work that you are doing doesn't add up to anything, while a whole industry that actually matters to saving the planet is looking for people like you, I want you to spend 30 minutes with me. Together, we'll map out what's actually happening in the clean energy market in your city, the companies, the roles, the career paths that fit where you already are. This 30 minutes, it is free. Link is in the show notes. Book a call. The Artemis crew named a crater on the moon after someone they loved. That's what it looks like when the work matters. I want that for you. I'm James Vancer. This is the SolarPunkPro podcast. We will see you on the next episode.